Well, welcome along, everybody, to another Monday night Sonar Masterclass. It's Monday, the 2nd of August, first Monday of the month. That, of course, is when we have our Sonar Masterclass. So great to have you all here. You can see there's a few people here already. Thank you for coming along. I'm going to bring our guest today, David Leonard, into the picture. So, David, welcome along to a Sonar Masterclass, mate.
Oh, I'm going to Hey, Greg. How you going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, mate. Great to have you here. Mate, you're up on the Whitsundays at the moment. A lot of people know you as the solo angler who's based in Noosa or Tewantin and does lots of stuff in that part of the world, but you're a bit further north at the moment.
Yeah, mate, I tend to travel overseas this time of year, but it's not happening this year, so I decided to go on a different adventure, and I've always wanted to come up to the Whitsundays. I came here about 12 years ago for a few days with a friend and his boat, and I loved it. It was always one of those places I wanted to come back and explore. So I kind of had a few months where I thought, I'll just hitch up the boat, come up here, find a place to stay, and do some fishing and some filming out amongst the islands and on the reef.
Yeah, life's tough, mate. I guess someone's got to do it, though. Now, look, guys, we've got. I wish it was me, but that's all right.
I'm definitely getting a lot of feedback from my friends. That's
a bit of envy there. Now, guys, we've got about 30 odd people in the room at the moment. We want to make sure that you can hear us okay. So, if you can hear us, get into the chat box beneath the video there. Type something in. Let us know where you're coming from. Let us know you can hear the audio all right. We've got a bunch of screenshots and things we're going to work through as the night progresses. Some screenshots of Dave's sonar as he goes out fishing around the East Coast for various different species, and we're going to talk through some of those and share a few photos. I'm not seeing any chat come through yet, so there is a bit of a delay. It's about a 10-second delay, guys. 10 seconds from when we speak to when you hear us, unfortunately, which is normal for Facebook. But anyway, we'll plug on. I can see that there's definitely people there tuning in. We'll wait for some feedback to come through. So, Dave, you're on the. Here we go. We've got Daryl coming from Port Stephens. Thank you, mate.
Thanks for letting me know.
I was getting a little bit worried there for a second. Doug Reed, excellent. Thank you, Doug. We've got we've made contact. Shane from Newcastle, great stuff. All right, now, Dave, you're on the Whitsundays. Yes. What are you fishing for there, mate? What are you targeting?
Well, mate, I tend to do a lot of bait fishing and some lure fishing in Noosa. So I thought I want to come up here to concentrate. I'll focus more on the surface fishing and the jigging. So, stick baits, popping, jigging, and soft plastics. And I got to say, I've been here 6 weeks so far, and the first 4 weeks was pretty tough because it was pretty windy. So I was only getting out once a week, and it's pretty daunting out there. Like it's a massive area. The islands just look amazing. There's so much good ground, and the fishing was really tough. It took me a while. I'm sure if I just went and sat around the islands and threw out some pillies, I'd get a few trout and whatever. But I'm chasing those big guys, the big GTs, big Spanish, the flats fishing, those, the wrasse, the reds, the nannies, all the stuff that I, either don't catch or catch a different way when I'm in Noosa. So it's been really challenging, and I'm finding my way. I've been getting some really good advice from a couple of very skillful locals over the last few weeks. One of them invited me out last week, and it was a fantastic session. Got a couple of bucket list fish, and it's getting there. The momentum is growing.
It's nice to know that even gun anglers like yourself, mate, when they go to new ground, there's still a learning curve,
when I moved from Brisbane after 15 years to Noosa, I had to learn how to fish Noosa. Yeah, and I'm definitely learning all over again, mate. So, I'm a novice up here.
Yeah, excellent. All right, and speaking of novices, I might just say from the outset tonight, I don't know, Dave, I think we're probably compared to previous weeks, we're probably not going to focus so much on technical stuff. And guys, feel free to fire us technical questions. But when you start shouting, makes and models and serial numbers and things at us, we may not have all the answers for you tonight, but we will find somebody who can help you. So feel free to fire the questions through. I think we're going to focus more on the fishing, what comes up on the screen, and how to interpret that. Am I right in saying that?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I don't have a real technical approach when it comes to using a sounder. I do the basics really well.
Yep, excellent, excellent. And that's what we want. We want the basics. We want to be able to get that down first, start catching fish, and then we can do the fancy stuff later and learn all the technical stuff later. So, mate, shall we start by putting a screenshot up?
Sure, yeah.
Let's get the first one up on the screen. All right. You want to talk us through what we're looking at?
Yeah, so basically what this is this is me going to look for kingfish off Noosa. So what you can see there is, I've basically got a fair idea of where the fish are going to be, and I've gone to a spot where they are at a certain time of the year, and I'm sounding around, and then I'm looking for schools of bait, and I'm looking for activity around that bait, and I'm looking for bigger fish hanging around those schools. And as you can see there, it's a pretty clear kind of description of a big bait school. You can see that big kind of triangular bait school on the, it's on my left-hand side. I'm not sure if that's what people are seeing. And then you'll see that, long, red, thick, not arch, but line behind it. And that is typically, a predator fish feeding on a bait school. There's some other stuff going on there. Like there's more bait on the bottom. There's bait to the right. But that's a typical display of what I would, look for when chasing a lot of different species, and that's a predator hunting bait.
Yep.
And so, when I see that on my sounder while I'm just idling around, or very slowly, 1 or 2 knots in this case, then I will, spot lock directly on top of that with my electric motor, and and deploy a bait to exactly the depth where I see that fish.
Okay. Now, for the beginners, mate, what have we got up here? This is all just noise and clutter.
That can be a number of things. I don't think it's the top bit. There's a bit of noise and clutter in the water because obviously in that you always get a bit of stuff. But I reckon what that is there is some bait getting like either smashed up by the kings and floating up out of the bait school. So I would say that it's probably some bits and pieces. There's a bit of a kill going on there.
Yep.
So that typically would be, bits of fish, leftovers.
Yeah.
Just floating up.
Clouds of scales and little particles.
I think so. I can't be 100% sure of that, but that's generally what I would think it would be.
So let's have a look at the next slide, because that, I think, shows, doesn't it, what was on that particular.
Yeah, and that's one of the kings. I mean, obviously during, once I spot lock on that spot, there were pretty continuous, schools of bait. I was on a big school of bait basically, and then kings were coming through, and I missed the first hookup. I got done basically, by a big king that just drove me into the bottom. I didn't go hard enough on it. So as sometimes happens, you're not ready for it. And so I was using live bait for this particular, on this particular day. So, obviously tighten the drag a little bit, put another bait out, lifted it a little bit higher off the bottom. So I had a little bit, a couple more extra meters to turn the fish's head. And, on the second go, that's the result there.
So just playing the percentages there, doing all those little 1% things, keeping it a little bit off the bottom, but still in the strike zones. You've just got that extra 50 centimetres or so of headway. And obviously, if the fish is coming up from underneath and it's heading in the right direction, you want to keep it heading that way.
That's right. I mean, look, I went harder on that second fish. The first one, I kind of, it just wasn't quite prepared, I guess. Sometimes you don't know how hard they're going to go. I didn't go hard enough, so I just tightened the drag a few more notches and, got stuck in him a bit harder and got him off the bottom. And, this guy did probably three pretty hard runs, and he would have been close to the bottom. But, as most people know when they go for kings, you got to wear them out a bit when you're in that shallow water.
Yeah. And they do like to wake us up, mate. If we've forgotten to just, crank the drag up that extra couple of nips, they're going to remind us. So
yeah, they definitely can teach you a lesson if you're not ready for them. There was some pretty big guys around that day. A mate of mine the day before had caught a 30-kilo one.
Wow.
And that's the reason. I was out mackerel fishing the day before, and I got some Spanish, and I saw him at the ramp, and he had a king, and I was like, oh, okay, a few kings around, right? I'm going to go chase kings tomorrow. And that's the other thing I tend to like to do is I will go out chasing a specific species, you know. And I was went home, re-rigged the gear, you know, two rods and reels ready and rigged for this particular species. And so, you know, I'm not mucking around on the boat once I actually find them. I'm ready to go.
Yep, cool. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And guys, feel free if you've got questions to fire through about, you know, any of the stuff we're talking about, or more generally about fishing the Sunshine Coast right up to the Whitsundays. Feel free to fire the questions through. So, what have we got here, Dave?
Mate, that is fishing a bit wider off Noosa. I'm out on the kind of middle reef, and that is a school of snapper feeding on a bait school.
So this is the bait up here, yes?
That's the bait, and those
the snapper down here.
Squiggly lines in the middle of the screen, directly under the bait school. Yep. Yeah, that's snapper. So what happened in this particular case is there's a video that I put up on YouTube a couple of years ago, I think it is now, where I had like a three-way hookup on the boat, and that's pretty much what was going on under the boat at the time. So there was also a couple of like small amberjacks as well, but predominantly it was snapper, and they were taking jigs, plastics, and baits basically.
Yeah. And of course here you can see also, you know, that looks to me like there's fish here pushing into the side of the bait school.
That's right. Yeah.
That kind of sharp edge.
They could have been, you know, they could have been small kings, small ambos, and snapper, all feeding on that school that was coming through at the time.
Yep. Now, do you find when you're snapper fishing that your bigger fish are up here underneath the bait, and as you go further down, the smaller snapper down deeper? Is that what you find?
Excuse me. Yeah, look, it depends on the area I'm fishing, but generally, yeah, the bigger snapper will be up a little bit higher. But having said that, I've caught bigger ones on the bottom as well. So, but you know, I would say a greater percentage of the bigger ones I definitely catch higher up the water column. They tend to have a bit of a hierarchy. But look, like I said, I know a lot of guys who catch, you know, 5, 6, 7 kilo, 8 kilo ones on the bottom. I tend to get them up higher, especially when I'm fishing with soft plastics or floating baits. And those bigger ones definitely have a, you know, they'll definitely come up higher if I'm using lighter gear.
Yep. And I have seen snapper, you know, in circumstances like that where you're in 80, 90 metres of water and they're 10 or 15 metres below the surface. If the bait are up there, they'll come right up.
Absolutely. So, and look, there's a few times, it's a really important thing with the sounder is when I've been fishing out in that depth of sort of 40 to 60 metres, I can see the snapper schools on the bottom. It's a shame I don't have a screenshot, but it kind of looks like if you look in the bottom right-hand corner of that screen, right, I'll often see snapper kind of just down there, you know, smooching on the bottom, and they won't be biting. They won't be taking baits or plastics. But then what happens as the tide starts to either turn or increase, they start coming off the bottom, and I start to see them up a little bit higher, like just under that 40 meter mark there. You can see those guys coming up a bit higher.
Yep.
And that tends to tell me that the fish are getting more active, and usually they'll start to take, you know, what's presented to them, baits or plastics. So, you know, you can find a school of snapper and it's on the sounder and they just won't bite. They're sitting on the bottom, you know, digesting, resting, whatever, sleeping. And then they come up the water column, and then that usually tells me that they're ready to feed.
Yeah, and that happens with a lot of species too, just quietly. I've observed the same thing with bream. I've had similar things with, you know, jewfish and bass and all sorts of species. They will sit on the bottom. You know that they're not particularly active when they're just clinging to the bottom, not doing much. And as soon as they start to come up off, and just recently talking to Jace Wilhelm as well, he was saying the same thing with the bait. If the bait are right down the bottom, they're feeling pretty comfy and secure. When they start moving up the water column, they've got something underneath them that are pushing them up. So good signs that something's changed and the fish are starting to come on the chew. So what was the outcome of that particular episode, mate?
Mate, that was the biggest fish out of that school, which took a soft plastic. And, you know, I got a bag of snapper basically. And then I moved and started chasing some other species.
Now, with your plastics, mate, you were using what kind of, you know, sort of jig heads and things? Talk to us about how to choose the right jig head and weight and hook size and all that kind of stuff for your plastics.
Well, I generally fish with a 7-inch soft plastic in the deeper water. If the bite is really subtle, then I'll go to a smaller plastic, like a 5-inch or a 4-inch curly tail. but I generally fish with a 7-inch jerk shad, varying, various different brands and colours. Predominantly pink is probably my go-to colour, the pink and whites. When I'm fishing for snapper, everyone has their favourites. The jig head size is obviously determined by the current, or how subtle I want the presentation, and the depth. Okay, so when I'm fishing at a depth of say 40 to 60 meters, I'm generally using from a ½ ounce up to an ounce of jig head, and obviously hook size to suit the plastic. Generally, is from memory, is like a 6.0 or 7.0 size hook. Wider the gape, I prefer a wider gape hook than a narrower gape, just because sometimes those big snapper have got really fat lips, and I've definitely missed hookups before with the not so wider gape hooks. So that,
it's always a trade-off, isn't it? In that deeper water, it's always a trade-off. In shallow water, it's easy. You go as light as you can, and you waft the lure around. In deeper water, you don't want the thing to sink like a stone, but you also can't wait for it to get all the way to the bottom, especially with the current. So you do need to go a bit heavier.
Well, yeah, look, I do go a little bit heavier, but I'll cast the lure a long way up current too, so that it's getting to the bottom as it's passing the boat.
Yeah,
if possible.
You're not spot locked on this particular spot, or are you spot locked?
Yeah,
you're spot locked.
Yeah. Right. Like when I'm fishing for snapper, 90% of the time in deep water, I'm spot locked. I only drift when I'm in waters under 30 or probably around 25 meters.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so then I can cast plastics off the front of the boat. But yeah, on this sort of in the deeper water, I definitely spot lock.
Excellent.
Yeah, right, and I do both with plastics. I'll cast one up current, and then I'll feed another one down, and just slowly let it sink off the back of the boat, just in the rod holder with the bail arm open, just keeping one of my eyes on it.
Yeah.
Very often they'll take one on the drop.
Yep.
And good old Rodney rod holder, the best fisherman on the boat. All I got to do is flick the bail arm, and he does the rest.
Yeah. Cool. All right, mate. I've got a bit of ahead of ourselves here, so I've brought up the next screenshot. What have we got? Right,
this is a typical example of if I'm in pelagic season and I'm around the bait schools. This is basically a large pelagic cutting through bait school. And this generally means that there's a marlin or a sailfish in the area. Sometimes it can be coves. It's not usually mackerel, because the mackerel don't tend to be smashing bait schools as much as the big fish in Noosa. But wahoo, sailfish, and marlin. That's when I see this on the sounder. And this particular screenshot was taken when I was actually collecting liveys. So this is at a spot where I go and get yakkers, as you can see by the waypoint, 158 yakkers. So I get my live baits there, but I do often get big predators there. And on this particular day, there just happened to be some beakies around. And
we've gone past one now.
Yeah, and so that one there is a shot of a different day, but that is a marlin sitting behind a bait school. You can just see the bait school on the right there, about to come into the screen.
Yep.
So that becomes quite a large bait school, and that's that kind of half arch to the left. That one there, yeah, that's a marlin, a small black marlin, basically just sitting behind the bait school.
Now, how do you know it's a marlin, mate?
Because that's what I caught. And the thing is, look, you don't know what's on your sounder until you catch it. Then you know, and that's just time on the water and time with your sounder. And like I didn't know what snapper looked like until I saw him on the screen, and then caught one. I went, right, now I know what snapper looked like. And the same with mackerel, the same with all the species. You kind of get to know what looks like what. And I know that a marlin has that kind of shape where it's not an arch, but it's kind of like a half arch,
A half arch marlin, hey?
A half arch marlin, yeah. That's a half arch fisherman.
That's right. Now, there's two things that jump out at me there, mate. One is if we were to go back to I'm not going to go back to the previous slide because I'll probably stuff it up and we'll get lost. But if we were to go back to the previous slide, you made the point that this is your spot where you go to catch your live baits. There's always yakkers there. But on this particular day, there were predators going through. And I've just recently done an episode about marlin fishing on the Sunshine Coast on the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. And we talked about exactly that people go to the bait grounds and get bait, and then they go way off into the distance to go and catch fish. But where there's bait, quite often there's also fish. And so, have a bit of a look around the bait grounds. Don't just assume that all that's there is bait.
Well, mate, look, at that particular spot on that previous slide, I've caught all kinds of pelagics there. Look, when I'm catching liveys, the first thing I do with the first string of liveys I bring up, I put one straight back out.
Yeah.
I drop one down, and 9 times out of 10, I catch a fish. Like most of the time, I'll catch a big cod there on the bottom, a Maori or a gold spot cod, and I've caught some ginormous ones there first thing in the morning, just by putting one back down. Other times, I've caught cobias, I've caught tuna, I've even bagged out on Spanish on that spot. So it's there's all sorts of fish show up there. Like you said, there's just where the bait is, there's usually predators. But many times, I've been to that spot, God knows how many dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Half the time I would catch a predator, and the other half I won't. Then sometimes there's no bait there.
Yep. The other thing that jumps out at me, mate, there's your marlin way over there. There's your bait way over there. So for all of those people, and you know who you are, when I'm out there having a fish and you go straight through the middle of the bait school trolling your lures, you don't need to troll right through the middle of the bait school. In fact, you better not to, because the predators are going to be circling around the outside. And species like marlin and wahoo and Spaniards, they're fast-moving fish. They could be hundreds of meters away and you're still in the zone. You don't have to go right through the bait school. If you do that, you're going to disperse the bait school, and you'll spoil it for everyone. That's the end of the fishing. So,
look, it's depends on what technique you're going to use to catch that fish. Like in this particular instance, I caught that fish, but I didn't catch it. I didn't catch it trolling that particular fish. I caught it sinking down a live bait.
Yep.
And so I free spooled a livey down into the bait school and caught the marlin. But also that same week, I caught half a dozen trolling skirts in the same area.
Yep. No, you're quite right. Yeah, if you are dropping baits down, that's a different matter. But I guess it's scooting through there on the main donk.
Yeah, but the thing is, like in this particular area, there was quite a large area and a lot of bait schools. So realistically, you just had to keep trolling around doing figure eights and circles and whatever until they switched on and came up and took the lure. And I was constantly going over bait schools, and the marlin were at varying lengths. But I guess it was also if I didn't get hits in the first kind of half an hour of trolling, I switched to a different technique because it told me that they weren't interested in a bait on the surface. They wanted something fed down to them at a deeper level. Yeah,
great point. The fish are there if they're not biting.
That marlin is sitting down at at 25 meters. He's not up at 10 meters.
Yep.
And there's the result.
That's the fish.
That's the fish that was sitting behind that bait school. And on that particular day, there was 20 plus probably boats in that area. And they were sitting, I just got away from the boats because I thought, well, there's going to be other bait schools. All these boats are getting in the way of each other. They're all trolling. I'm going to get about 500 meters away from them and look for a different bait school. And I'm sure I'll find a marlin. Sure enough, got away from the other boats, put a livey down, and literally it was a few minutes and I had a fish.
Yep.
You can even see you can see my sounder in the background in that screenshot, and you can see a big clump of red on the bottom, and that's a big bait school.
Yep. Okay, cool. Let's move on.
So that's a pickie of pretty much another one of the fish, but, caught on a lure a couple of days later. We had an interesting week where it doesn't happen very often, but the small blacks, we had a really good push of blue water come right in close in Noosa in December just gone, 6 months ago. And, this is the first time I've seen it in the 10 years I've been there. I've seen them obviously out wider in deeper water, but yeah, they came right in close into that 25, 30 meters, and we were literally 10 minutes from the river mouth, and we were, into these fish. So it was just a lucky week, basically, where they were all enclosed.
Yeah, yeah. Is that a line of Lumo beads there on the Lumo sinkers on the?
No, that's air coming off the line. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that is. That's Lumo beads. Yeah, I just use them as spacers, just to get, I mean, you can put crimps in there if you want.
Yep.
But sometimes I'll just put some Lumo beads in there as a bit of extra attractant.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's move on. Another screenshot.
Right. So this one is a typical Spanish mackerel attack. So you can see multiple fish there in different areas of the screen. A couple on the right, one on the left. You can see bits and pieces of red, which are ones that are obviously just coming into the screen and then you can see that big clump in the middle. And there's a big Spanish there, that big red. That's a big guy. He's on some bait there. He's having a munch. And there's a couple of I don't know what they are above him. They could be school mackerels, slightly smaller fish. So this is a typical day where you've got school mackerels, probably some spotties and some Spanish, and generally when I see that on the sounder, once again, I'll either spot lock, or you don't normally see that if you're trolling. You don't get that much detail. You'll see that when you're going a couple of knots, or when you're spot locked, and those fish start coming under the boat, and that's happy days, mate. That's what that is.
Yeah, 0.7 knots there is the speed over the ground. So yeah.
Yeah. So I'm literally idling. So I've pulled up. I've seen something on the sounder and going, right, what's this? And I've put it in idle, and that's the current just pushing me along a little bit, and that's what's happening under the boat. And then I'm going to hit spot lock and get out the arsenal of toys and catch some fish.
And what were you using that day? Metal jigs.
Hey, on those days, I'll use fast retrieve jigs like the photo you're seeing now, because I can drop it down to the depth. But at the same time, I will usually have a floating pilchard out the back, which I've cast up current and it's sinking down, or if there's no current, cast out the back and just weightless going down through the water column. And I'll also have some liveys in the tank. So then that gives me options depending on what they want to feed on. Like mackerel have, different moods every hour. So 1 minute they want something fast, and they want something alive, and they want something dead. So I just give them everything and then figure out what they want.
So with your sounder, mate, and mackerel, I mean, a lot of people, they think about looking for bait. That's going to be where the predatory fish are. But what other information can you get? Can you get information about how the mackerel are behaving or what they might be biting on by interpreting your sounder screen?
Well, look, if they're on a bait school, it's pretty obvious. But most of the time I don't catch them on bait schools. I usually get them just in areas where they show up. Like they can be, this is one thing I'm learning here in early in the Whit Sundays. It's completely different where they show up compared to, say, Noosa. Like, I can't find bait schools here. They're just not anywhere. And that's the first thing I'm looking for, just to see where the activity is, and then I'll look around that area. Or I'll look at, ledges, isolated rocks and bommies, that kind of stuff that stick right up, and, then you'll, or channels where there's faster flowing water. But it's in Noosa, it's very different. There's just areas where they show up. There will be bait, but it doesn't necessarily have to be big bait schools, They just show up in any of a dozen places. So it's just a matter of going to those areas and kind of just floating around, looking around slowly. Sometimes I will troll lures around to find them first and then just hang in that area. That's a good way to find them. You don't often always see them on the sounder, but sometimes you do. You'll see schools of them, either Spanish or spotties, and they will look a bit different. They won't look like the long lines. They'll just look like a squiggly kind of group.
I am going to try and go back to it. There we go.
Yeah, so they when you're trolling, if that in the center of that screen there, if you took out that big one, and those other ones on top of it would kind of be typical of what I would see if I was trolling. Because you're moving at speed, you're not going to get the full image on your sounder. Unless you swim directly over the school. And then sometimes I don't even see them. But if I see that under the boat, I can literally count to 10 and I'll get a hit.
Okay. And trolling speed for mackerel, mate? What's your...
For me, 5 to 7 knots.
5 to 7, yep.
Okay. And with 3 deep diving minnows out the back, varying depths, 3 meters, 5 meters, 7 meters, or 8 meters.
All right. Excellent. Guys, feel free to ask questions. You good? You want to keep going, or you want to go back?
No, that's fine. Yeah.
You good? Okay. All right.
So that picture there is, you can see that long line, like 45-degree line that's come from the top down, and then a straight line. That's me deploying a bait on a downrigger. So that big, thick line is the actual ball of the downrigger. Okay, and then you can see kind of squiggly lines above it a little bit, the thin ones, and then the thin one below it. That's my live bait. Okay, now if your sounder doesn't show that, then you need to refine your sounder so you can see that kind of stuff. So, you know, you want to, and then that big fat line, well, that's a good old Spanish mackerel coming off the bottom and coming up to eat my bait.
Now, when you say you want to refine your sounder, you know, for a lot of people, they'd look at this and say, that's too noisy. I'm going to, you know, drop the gain back down a little, declutter that screen. But you do that, you're going to lose this detail that you need. Yeah,
I mean, obviously it's different on every sounder and every boat, but because I know that if it's red and orange and thick, then that's all I want to see. The rest I don't really care about. I'm ignoring it. You know what I mean? So the clutter doesn't bother me at all, as long as I can see what I want to see. You know, if I reduce the gain on that, then I would definitely see less. I would still see those big, you know, obvious fish. Yeah, but sometimes, I mean, the clutter doesn't bother me. I mean, you can reduce it if you want, but you know.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just personal choice. And there's a result.
That's the Spaniard that came up off the bottom, eh?
So that's a spanner that's come up and eaten a live bait. Yep, deployed from a downrigger.
Look at the jaws on that. Even Rex Hunt wouldn't kiss that one.
That's right. But I mean, you know, these guys will, look, depending on the mood, you know, I probably didn't even need to use a downrigger. I probably could have just dropped a jig or a trolling lure or whatever. You know, it's just depends on their mood on the day.
Yep, when they're eating, they're eating.
That's right.
All right.
So this is an interesting one. This is out a little bit wider once again, fishing off of Mooloolaba, or from Noosa, but pretty much out from Mooloolaba. In May is the time of the year, and this is when the sailfish tend to show up. And what that is there is, you can see those 2 lines going downward from left to right. Yep, that is a live bait being free spooled down under the boat. And that's a sailfish, the other one, that line coming up, that's a sailfish coming out of the bait school to eat the live bait. And that's a pretty awesome thing to see when you see that happening. And that's before the bite. And I was fishing with another guy on the boat, really experienced fisherman called Nick Jones from Noosa, pretty gun fisherman. And he was teaching me a few things that day. And that was, you know, I was watching the screen. He was free spooling a bait down. That was awesome just to see that fish. So he's free spooling. I'm on the controls, like, you know, keeping the boat in position. And, you know, I turned to Nick and said, mate, I think you're about to get a bite. There's a fish coming out of the bait school. It's coming up and it's going to hit it. And sure enough, within a few seconds, you know, he had line peeling off the reel.
Yeah, yeah. So this down here, the red, that's not the bottom.
No, that's bait.
So you've got you've got it up off the bottom. You're focusing on that top part of the water column. Yep.
So we've come over this bait school. We've actually jigged some bait out of that school. They were slimy mackerels.
Yep.
And you know, the age-old thing, you know, feed them what they want, what they're eating. So, and then we're just hooking them up, sending them straight back down into the bait school, and seeing what comes out of it. You know, we've obviously, before deploying this bait, we've seen them on the bait schools. We've marked fish, so we've gone, right, this is the spot for us to put our liveys down.
And isn't it amazing? All this bait down here, and they find that one. right? That's
It
creating
is. Their eyesight is amazing in that respect. That and they're super lazy, so they're going to go for whatever the easiest option is, and that's that one that's 20 meters above where they actually were.
Yeah, and
so he would have been chewing probably on the top of that bait score in the left corner there.
Yep.
And he's just he's come through there, probably whacked a few with his bill, and then looked up and seen that one coming down, and gone, here's an easy feed.
Yeah. Yep. And not so easy in the end.
And there he is. Yeah. So we got a couple that day. We missed a few, but we got a couple to the boat, which was it was great fun.
Excellent.
And some beautiful footage to go with it, mate.
Yeah. Some awesome photography there, mate.
Great shots. Just underwater GoPro, mate, over the side of the boat.
Simple as that, eh?
Absolutely.
Make it sound so easy.
Point and shoot, mate.
Excellent. And that is the end of the slide deck, mates. I'm going to bring us up on the screen again, a little bit bigger, rather just have a black screen there. Let's turn that off. There we go. So, folks, that's pretty much it for our presentation today. We're going to just continue to chat for a few more minutes. If you've got questions, though, about any of the species that we've talked about or any of the screenshots that we've shown, if you'd like us to go back and pull one of those screenshots up again, then leave a comment there in the chat, and we're happy to answer whatever questions you put up. So, mate, let's have a bit more of a talk about your fishing around the Whitsundays, though. So you're not finding the bait school. So what's the next move, mate?
Well, look, I'm finding locations. I mean, I've been out to the reef a couple of times, and the first time was pretty quiet. I probably should have gone a bit further. The thing I'm not used to here is the distances you've got to go to get fish. You've got to go a long way here. I mean, I'm used to going off Moosa, 10, 15, 20 Ks. If I do a big day, I'll go 50 Ks, Here, it's not unusual to go 70, 80, 90, 100 kilometres to get to a destination, Yep. So I realised, look, the islands are tough to fish. Like obviously the locals have got their spots, and they know, they know where the GTs are, or they know where there's a few Spanish, or but they're not there all day. They're there at certain times of the tides. They're on certain, water temperatures, moon cycles, barometric pressure, water clarity. So there's a lot of variables and a lot of islands and a lot of area to cover. So I'm slowly narrowing it down to a good dozen areas to focus on, and I'm just I'm getting the odd fish here and there. And I did a trip last week out to the reef and did an overnighter, and I got a good selection of fish from GTs, Spanish, nanny guys, red throat emperors, a lot of surface strikes. One good fish out of those strikes. So it's improving each time I go.
Yep.
It's just a learning experience. But I'm using the sounder very differently than I would in Noosa. I'm looking for different things. I'm looking for pressure edges. I'm actually using probably a lot more eyesight. And then my sounder is kind of secondary, at the moment. In shallow waters anyway. But then when I'm jigging, I'm using my sounder to look for. But I'm also not so much looking for big fish. I'm looking for differences in contours on the bottom. And, like, for instance, I'm looking for like a bit of green, which is weed, as opposed to the hard bottom, which is red. So, and, on the boat I was on last week with the local, I pulled a 9 kilo red emperor out of that green weed, and it wasn't on the sounder. I couldn't see the fish,
Yep. Okay, cool.
It's
question that's come through from Craig. He's asking what transducer you're using for these shots, a 3-in-1 or a 1 kilowatt?
No, I'm actually just using a Lowrance HDI skimmer, 600 watt transducer off the back of the boat. It's a dual frequency, 5200 megahertz.
Yep.
It's not actually a very expensive transducer. I think they're like $300 or $400. It's pretty basic, but I've got it set up in exactly the right spot where it doesn't get interference from the motor or under the boat, and it reads clearly at 30 knots.
Wow. Yep. That's what you want.
Yeah. So it took me a while to get the right spot. I did some research, and once again, talked to some guys who know what they're doing. been on a few boats where they're wrong and where they're right, and just kind of, copy the ones that were in the right spot, and eventually found the exact right angle for the the angle that my boat sits in the water at different speeds, and now it reads really well.
Yeah, the angle and the depth just below the hull as well it could be a matter of a centimetre or two can make a big difference to you.
Massive difference.
What you get on the screen. So yeah. Good stuff. Thanks for the question there, Craig. So I think we're I'm going to start to wrap it up. We haven't had too many questions tonight, but it has been a great presentation. The people that have been here from the start have stayed till the end. We really appreciate that, guys. Thank you to everyone that chimed in. Let us know that you could hear us okay. Otherwise, I would have been a little bit worried, I have to say, that we weren't being heard. So I'm glad that we were. So Dave, let's just wrap up by letting people know a little bit about your website and your videos and where they can find all of that stuff.
Yeah, sure, mate. I mean, I've got a few videos that I sell, or films that I sell through my website, which is www.soloangler.com. There's a really comprehensive noosa film there. There's an advanced mackerel techniques film, and there's two location films, one from 1770 and one from Lucinda up north. Different styles and techniques in all the films. There's some merchandise stuff there, but basically, and then if you go to YouTube, there's a lot of free films on the YouTube channel, which is just Solo Angler, and the Instagram is solo.angler. There's plenty of stuff coming from the Whitsundays. I'm just collecting that footage, and it's coming soon. So I have some new stuff, and hopefully another film to pass on to people so they can see this amazing place. I mean, it's just such a beautiful place.
Yeah. But a question from Stephen about your favourite frequency for downrigging.
I'm usually on 200. On 200 megahertz, because I'm not fishing in really deep water. So if I was fishing in, like a few hundred meters, I would switch to 50. But it's usually 200.
You'd want a pretty heavy downrigger ball to be in 300 meters of water, mate.
Yeah. So look, I'm very rarely fishing in more than 80 meters of water, and when I'm downrigging, usually it's not much deeper than 50 meters.
Yeah. Have you changed the wire on your downrigger over to heavy braid? Is that a lot of people do that? You're just using the wire? Yeah.
The standard Scotties, the wire that comes with the Scotties downrigger.
Yep. Yeah. Very good. All right, mate. Well, look, I think we might bid you farewell. So for those who came along today, don't forget to go and check out soloangler.com. Make sure you go on and follow Dave on social media as well. Make sure you get all his information as it comes out. Lots of good stuff there to tune into. So for coming along tonight, Dave, thank you very much for helping us out, helping us to understand sonar that little bit better. Everybody enjoy your sonar. If you're not in lockdown, I hope you get out and get a fish over the next week or two. If you are in lockdown, it's the time to be doing a bit of boat maintenance, a bit of tackle maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So you've got all the 1%ers done before you hit the water. So thanks, everyone, and good night.
Thanks, mate.